It's Friday night, and your mom's out in the car with the engine running, the pizza's getting cold in the back seat, and her patience is ticking down like the final seconds in a third round of Mortal Kombat, and you are fresh out of quarters. She's honking like she's summoning the gods of parental rage, and you're frozen in time. Stuck in the video store and surrounded by towering shelves and aisles that stretch like ancient temples of VHS glory. The gods of gore, action, and roundhouse kicks taped over 1,000 times. This is not just your local mom and pop store. It's a dojo, and you are about to choose your master. You've got 30 seconds to pick your entire weekend identity. One wrong move, and you are stuck with 3 ninjas kick back. Again. And then he appears. The clerk. Sideburns sharp as shattered boards, eyes like worn TV screens flickering with every lost frame of Drunken Master, the kid with the golden arm, and even that stuff that never made it stateside. He's not here to upsell. He's not here to correct. He's here to awaken. Your analog dungeon master, your spiritual rewind sensei. Part kung fu monk and part midnight movie prophet. He slides a tape across the counter like a sacred relic wrapped in cardboard and plastic, leans in and says, "This one's for you. Rewind and be kind." Welcome to the BAMF Podcast. I'm your host, Sideburnzombie, and tonight we're kicking nostalgia in the face and throwing it out the frickin' window. Let's hit play. All right, Rewind Junkies. Welcome to the Cult Pick of the Week. And this week, we're throwing flying kicks and roundhouses straight through your speakers because tonight, it's all about Kung Fu cinema. Yeah, I'm not going to just recommend a movie this week. I'm going to recommend a whole freaking genre. Look, if you're anything like me, your introduction to martial art flicks probably wasn't hardcore stuff first. For most kids, it was something safe, like Daniel-san waxing on and waxing off in Karate Kid. Maybe something like the Ninja Turtles or something like that. It was your first taste of martial arts magic. Training montages, wise old senseis, bullies getting crane kicked right into oblivion. It was great. It got us hooked. It was pretty much a gateway drug. And then in the 90s, martial arts kind of went a little bit more mainstream. And we got movies like Street Fighter with Jean-Claude Van Damme, whose accent somehow made Guile the most un-American hero ever. And one of the worst, best video game movies ever made, Mortal Kombat. And then we also got in some other martial art movies like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 and 3, and then Three Ninjas as well. Movies like Sidekicks was also a fun movie from the early 90s. I think that the real turning point and a real BAMF moment was Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx. Now, Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx was a fresh look into martial art movies for yours truly when I was a young 13, 14-year-old kid. So, I mentioned Mortal Kombat, and when that movie came out on VHS, now we saw Mortal Kombat in the theater, probably saw it like 3 or 4 times in the theater. That movie was just badass. But when it came out to VHS, there was a preview on the beginning of the VHS tape for Mortal Kombat for Rumble in the Bronx. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I had never seen anything like that ever. I needed to see this movie. I needed to know what this movie was. So let me just pause real quick here for a story time. So it was, 1994, 1995, and I was hyped beyond belief to see Rumble in the Bronx when it came out to VHS. So my dad said, "I'm going to run up to the video store and I'm going to get the movie for us and, get a couple friends over and we'll all watch this movie together because it looks like it's going to be really awesome." And you know what? God bless him. The man went up to the video store that was in the next town over, and he comes home, big smile on his face, like he just scored the big win, and popped the tape in, and we see the title Rumble in Hong Kong. Yeah, not Rumble in the Bronx. Yeah, okay, Jackie Chan was in it, but he was playing this weird, shady gang leader. And the thing I remember the most about it was this big ass mole that he had on his face. Look, it was funny. I mean, the movie was funny, whatever. It was just funny. But it was funny the way that my dad went thinking he was going to get that movie, and he got this movie. And as I was recording this, it made me think, it made me wonder how many of you out there have had your parents bring home the wrong tape from the video store? You know, sending mom to the video store to get Robocop and she comes home with Robocop 3. Or, you know, your dad making the mistake and bringing home Troll instead of Gremlins. Do me a favor. Send me your rental store mishaps. Send it in through email. Leave a comment on the bottom. You find me anywhere on social media under BAMF Podcast. Trust me, I know we've all had these stories, and I want to share them here. So let me know. Anyway, let's get back to Rumble in the Bronx. So finally, we rent Rumble in the Bronx, and it is just a awakening. Jackie wasn't just a hero who dodged punches. He took every hit, every bruise, and turned it into some kind of comedic gold. Because the movies were funny too. The way he took those hits, he'd make a funny face, and it looked like he was really taking these hits. And especially like that warehouse scene where he was flipping through the shopping carts and, you know, using refrigerators and pinball machines as weapons. It was like martial arts ballet. And again, I had never seen anything like this. It was just pure, absolute badassery. And then at the end of the movie, you see this blooper reel that shows Jackie doing all his own stunts and getting carried off on a stretcher and running around, you know, not running because he broke his foot and he's in a wheelchair and just has a big smile on his face, just acting like the pure legend that he is. And it really, I wanted more. I wanted more Jackie Chan and I wanted more of this martial arts stuff. And I went to the Video Hound book and I started looking at other kung fu movies and stuff that we might have had in the video store. And one movie that kind of also changed my life was from my buddy Joe, who now my brother-in-law, handed me a tape of Master of the Flying Guillotine. He didn't say anything. He just handed it over to me like the ancient relic that it was. And I popped it in the VCR and boom, mine was blown. I mean, exploding arms, flying decapitations, a blind assassin, and the weirdest use of yoga powers I've ever seen. It what didn't really just like stick with me as a martial arts movie. It totally converted me. And after that, I started tracking down a whole bunch of different martial art movies from Jackie, Jet, Sammo, Michelle Yeoh, Donnie Yen. I dove into all the classics, 36 Chambers Shaolin, you know, Master Killer over here as it was called, Magnificent Butcher, the original Street Fighter movie with Sonny Chiba, Armor of God, another Jackie Chan movie, which I absolutely love that movie. And then also the beautiful bloody mess that is Ricky-O, the story of Ricky. And when I saw that movie, I was like, oh my God, they made a kung fu movie and a trauma movie. And you got your chocolate on my peanut butter and you made the one of the best movies ever. So it was just like, boom, that was it. And I was a full disciple of martial art movies. Now, you know, I always watched martial art movies throughout the years. And when Kill Bill came out, it kind of resurrected martial art movies again. Wu-Tang Collection started coming out on DVD, and you started seeing movies that you never saw before. And because they started bringing the movies over here, and they started cleaning those movies up, and fast forward the tape to years later during COVID, while everybody was on lockdown and people weren't really doing anything and movie theaters were closing up and everything like that. I still went to work. I work in a hospital, so the hospital still ran and the hospital still needs their supplies, and that's what I do. So it was kind of like coming home, and I had two things that kept me going during COVID. And one of those was the resurrection of Call of Duty and jumping on Call of Duty every night and playing it. And then also the resurrection of martial arts movies. And I got into the deep end of the pool with martial arts movies and jumping headfirst into a whole bunch of the Golden Harvest vault. I started watching movies like Dragons Forever, Millionaire's Express, Righting Wrongs, Mr. Vampire, and I was just devouring these movies as fast as I can get them. I mean, I started going deep and deep into the rental pile and all that kind of stuff. Just getting these physical media, like buying all these physical media, buying these Blu-rays and stuff like that. Buying Blu-rays from, you know, China, Europe, those kind of movies because they don't make them over here even still now. And this is only 4 or 5 years ago. And getting a Blu-ray player that can play, multi-regional DVDs. And I started going back to the 70s and getting movies like Lady Whirlwind and One Armed Boxer, which I had no idea was the actual prequel to Flying Guillotine. Master of the Flying Guillotine, not Flying Guillotine, the Flying Guillotine movie, but Master of the Flying Guillotine. It blew my mind when I was like, wait a minute, this is the guy, and that's Jimmy Wang Wu, and I started really diving headfirst into that. It was just magic, pure cinema, and you know what? As I go on here, I know I'm throwing a lot of love at Golden Harvest. I also love Shaw Brother movies. They're beautiful, operatic, iconic movies, and we wouldn't have Golden Harvest if we didn't have Shaw Brothers. But the thing I love about the Golden Harvest movies is that they hit harder, they feel rougher, dirtier, hungrier, and it's like they were fighting for that screen time and bloodshed, and it was just all in the same breath. And you know that when you hear the Golden Harvest theme song at the beginning of the movie, you know you're in for one badass movie, one hell of a ride, honestly and truly. Then it was the time to start really getting into watching a whole bunch of kung fu movies during COVID, during lockdown. And I put together a list, because people like lists. People want to hear about lists. So let's take a 5-second break, and I will be back, and I'm going to give you a list of some badass kung fu movies. All right, we're back. And as I said, I know people love lists, and I put together a list of 5 BAMF approved kung fu flicks in no particular order because I'm telling you that the kung fu movies that I watch and the kung fu movies that I love, these things change like the wind and also my blood sugar. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low, most of the times it's high. So anyway, let's get into the very first one. We're talking about. We've been talking about it. It's Rumble in the Bronx. I know that a lot of people are not a fan of Jackie Chan when it comes to martial arts. They think he's overrated. They think he's, too mainstream and sellout kind of thing. But to me, personally, I would not like these martial art movies as much as I do if it wasn't for that first time seeing that preview for Rumble in the Bronx and saying, I know this is going to change my view and quite possibly my life when it comes to martial art movies. Just the stunt work and the fight choreography. If you haven't watched Rumble in the Bronx, go fix that right now. Second movie that I'm going to recommend to you is a movie that stars Michelle Yeoh and Cynthia Rothrock called Yes, Madam. Now, these are two police officer buddy cop movies that are teaming up, kicking people directly in the face, smashing them through all different kinds of furniture and glass. And I'm telling you, it is probably one of the best buddy cop movies you didn't know you needed. Another movie that I want to recommend to you is a movie that I mentioned before, and that is called Mr. Vampire. And Mr. Vampire is kung fu meets horror meets comedy. It has hopping vampires, Taoist priests, these best slapstick fights that you've ever seen, and facial expressions, and just really just a fun movie to watch. I mean, you got to trust me on this one. It's gold. And then I want to recommend a movie because again, I know I'm still in this Jackie Chan kind of feel, and there's a lot of other movies out there that are good. And we will definitely visit a whole different kind of martial arts movies in a different light. But this movie here is Wheels on Meals, and this has Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung, and it also has Yung Biao. And I know I'm probably butchering his name. I always do. I never get the proper pronunciation for for his name. Sorry. But in this movie, Jackie Chan and Yun Biao are they are working in a food truck, and they get involved with a woman, and she's like a con woman, and she's getting involved in some things that she shouldn't be getting involved with, and these guys are going to help. And Sammo Hung is like a guy who kind of just gets kind of shoehorned into the story, and the three of them are trying to work together to help this girl, and it all leads to this big climactic fight at the end of the movie that is one of the best movies I'm sorry, best fight scenes that I have ever seen. It is between Jackie Chan and Benny the Jet. And you know what? Even if you don't want to watch this full movie, which I know is now streaming on Amazon Prime, but if you don't want to watch the whole movie, just go to YouTube and type in Jackie Chan versus Benny the Jet. They fought in two movies. This one, Wheels on Meals, and another one called Dragons Forever. Both fight scenes are absolute badass classics. You gotta check them out. And finally, if I'm going to be recommending martial art movies and martial art movies that are badass, I have to recommend Enter the Dragon. I know it's a very popular movie, and most people who watch martial art movies have probably seen Enter the Dragon, but it really is a good footprint, another movie that kind of brought Kung Fu to the mainstream. And I think it deserves a place on this list because, again, if you really kind of getting started into saying, I want to watch some martial art movies, starting with Enter the Dragon and Bruce Lee, very popular. Uh, Bruce Lee being very popular, the movie being very popular. It's it's great fight scenes in it, great story. Mortal Kombat, kind of the same kind of deal. You go into an island and you're in a tournament of kung fu. So it kind of like all started there. So these movies are my temple of VHS worship, I guess you can call it. They're classic, not because they're perfect or they're old, but because they're fearless and wild, and some of them are unapologetic. And that's my way, and that's the BAMF way. We embrace the chaos, we celebrate the weird, and we rewind the glory. It's just something that we do here. And that's my Kung Fu journey from mistaken rentals to full blown fandom, Jackie Chan to hopping vampires and hoverboats and flying guillotines. It's a genre, and it's a genre that didn't just entertain me. It like totally rewired my whole brain. It gave me a love for stunt work and choreography, discipline, and above all, the chaotic energy with purpose. So, if you haven't dived into kung fu martial art movies, the shelf is waiting. And if you have, drop me a line. Tell me what your favorite tell me what your first were. Tell me your wireless rental that your folks ever bought home. I really want to hear those stories. That's like something I definitely want to hear. So stay tuned. We got a call from a good friend in the late fee confessional, and later we'll dive into the static zone to see if Kung Fu cinema still punches through today. Welcome back, and now we are in the late fee confessional. Now, this is the part of the show where we dim the lights and crack open the vault and rewind straight into the collective memory of every VHS freak, rental junkie, and dusty shelved warrior out there. Today, we hear from a very good friend of mine, Mark, also known as Dutch, who is the host of the Tales from the Tabletop RPG Dustpan podcast. He's talking right to you about all things role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, his own games that he's writing like AAIE. And today he's calling in not just with his favorite movie, but he is dropping some of the best trivia for the movie that he is recommending, that it's almost like it should just be printed right on the back of the VHS box. So grab your popcorn, sit back, grab your dark sunglasses, because I'm telling you, this isn't just one of his memories. He's going to give you a masterclass in the movie.
Hello, thank you for taking my call. I've understood that you want to talk about movies, so we're going to talk about movies today as I drive in the Rolling Kia studio. Here we go. I'm going to talk about 1980. It's a long time ago, 45 years ago. And I want to talk about the finest comedy to come out in 1980. And no, I'm not going to say Airplane. I'm going to talk about the Blues Brothers. And that's right. I'm going to put the Blues Brothers ahead of any other comedy that came out in 1980. And I'm going to stand by that. Why? Because it was significant in a lot of ways, where some of these other movies were just vanilla comedies. And, the Blues Brothers had some issues getting produced. It had a choppy screenplay, to say the least. Dan Aykroyd wrote the screenplay, didn't know how to write screenplays. Dan Aykroyd being an extremely early part of his career. Production costs spiraled beyond what the studio wanted. Didn't get a full release because of basically racism. Let's just be clear about it. It had older African American musicians in it playing a musical style that wasn't popular at the time, as popular as it had been maybe 20 years before this movie came out, 25, maybe 15 years. A lot of the musicians in this movie are icons, but people don't realize in 1980, none of them had had a hit in several years. Aretha Franklin is an icon, but she wasn't huge in 1980. Cab Calloway wasn't huge in 1980. John Lee Hooker wasn't huge in 1980. It was not an easy thing to get a blues-based movie over in 1980. And then when you go to distribute it, distributors didn't want to put it in predominantly white neighborhoods because they didn't want to draw the wrong crowd, if you know what I'm saying. And they didn't think that white suburban dads would go to this movie, even though it had John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd in it, who were, at the time this movie started filming, huge stars on the most popular recurring comedy TV show on television. So the studio was kind of scared of it. The distributors were even more scared of it. Everybody thought they were going to take a bath, but you know what they made? They made a classic. They made a classic film. And they made a culturally significant film. And that's what was interesting about it. Because there was not many films in the 1980s that were actually celebrating African American culture the way the Blues Brothers movie did. Because they did it unironically. It was a celebration of the urban blues culture. You have John Lee Hooker playing Boom 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 on the street with a killer band. And unless you knew, you didn't know. You have Aretha Franklin singing in her soul food restaurant. You have Cab Calloway doing Minnie the Moocher to delay the start of the show. It's James Brown as a preacher. I'm driving to my car right now, so these are just things that I can pull out of my memory. That's because they're embedded kind of in my brain. Shaka Khan is one of the chorus members behind James Brown. You know, there's a lot of people in this movie. You don't even realize they're in this movie. John Candy's in this movie. Pee Wee Herman's in this movie before he was Pee Wee Herman. So it's Paul Rubens is in this movie. There's a lot of people in this movie. I mean, even the director, John Landis, he's in the movie. He's one of the cops when they're going through the mall. It's a pretty incredible film, but I don't even respect it as much as a comedy. While it is funny, there's some very funny moments. And a lot of the moments in the movie are just way too over the top for their own good. But then it always comes back down to the Blues Brothers. And they're so deadpan through the movie in most instances. I mean, Belushi's never too deadpan. I mean, it's Belushi, but especially Aykroyd plays so straight through the movie that it even gives a balance. Like, those quiet moments balance out the completely over the top. I mean, they're throwing Illinois Nazis into the river. Again, just another kick in the nuts of racism. Just the way it should be in a movie in 1980, when we were starting to try our best to move out of the 60s and 70s. We were trying our best to get past a lot of the baggage that were coming out of the 60s and the 70s. 1980 is the cusp of that, and it's before everybody took off their rose-colored glasses and the 80s became like the beginning of really horrible consumerism. It was before that. It was kind of like almost like an innocent, not innocent, hardly innocent, but a different kind of couple years there, like 79, 80, 81. It was a weird time. And it was kind of the perfect time for this movie, because this movie could say, hey, look, we're going to take this subject matter, we're going to build a comedy around it, we're going to hire a comedy director, but then we're going to unironically treat these cultural touchstones with respect and let the music do a lot of the talking for the movie. It's got one of the best soundtracks ever. And people could argue, like, well, the musicianship isn't fantastic because they're all studio artists and it's not really a band. Screw you. It was a fantastic band. The band that they put together to make that movie and Briefcase Full of Blues was amazing. And yes, they're mostly studio musicians, because those studio musicians from like Stax Records and just everywhere, they made that Chicago sound. And those guys and gals were the people on those records who maybe not got the attribution they deserved, but they definitely, in hindsight, should be recognized as the architects of an actual American sound, which is not something we have a lot of. There's very few truly American art forms besides the blues, jazz, and rap. And musically speaking, I don't even know if I could really call rock and roll completely American when the British had such a big part of it. I don't know. I don't want to get into those weeds because I'm not an expert, clearly. I'm not an expert on movies either. But I think The Blues Brothers is one of my favorite movies and touches me specifically, not so much as a comedy, but more as a movie of its time that is far more culturally significant in hindsight than it ever could have been in 1980. So even though it had overrunning budgets, rough start with its screenplay, difficulty getting the musicians and actors they wanted, they had to make demands. The stars of the movie had to make demands to get the African American musicians included in the movie and with speaking roles, because then, my God, you have to pay them. They had difficulty with that. On top of the fact that the two main stars quit Saturday Night Live before the movie came out. Besides the fact that the main star, John Belushi, had a massive cocaine issue at the time of filming. It still manages to A, be funny 45 years later. Funny without being crude in most instances. And B, it still acts as a time capsule of that urban blues sound coming out of the 60s and 70s. And I really think that that's as important as any laugh that they got. And also, Carrie Fisher is in it, which is awesome. So, there you go. That's my take on the Blues Brothers. I don't know. I am the last person you want to talk to about movies because I don't know much about them. I hope this is usable. Edit out what you want. Have a great day.
Mark, thank you so much for calling in, dude. That was so awesome. Some of the other cameos that are in the Blues Brothers is Frank Oz, who played the voice of Miss Piggy and multiple Muppets, but Yoda. And also, Steven Spielberg had a cameo in the Blues Brothers. He's in it for like 3 seconds. You see him really quick, when they're trying to get into the building that's locked at the end there. So thanks again, Dutch, for calling in, leaving that message. That was awesome. So if you have your own late fee confessional, send it in. Reach out and we will put it on the show. And I can't wait to hear what you got to say. Stay tuned. We are going into the static zone next. Welcome to the static zone. And this is where we take a second to rewind the tape and ask ourselves, does the stuff we love still hold up? Or is it just nostalgia doing nostalgia's thing? So today we ask the question, does Kung Fu cinema still punch in 2025? Is it still badass? Is it still relevant? Still worth slapping on a yellow jumpsuit and slow-mo screaming through a cloud of mooks that are just going to fall down on the ground with one hit anyway? Well, here's it. The short answer, yeah. Hell yeah, it still holds up. I might be a little biased, but yeah, I think it still holds up. The long answer, let's get into it. Look, Kung Fu movies were never about just flips and fists. They're about philosophy, honor, discipline. Some are about revenge and redemption. Yes, sometimes hopping vampires and exploding heads. But beneath all that, it was about code, the spirit, a hero's journey told through one high kick at a time. Now, flash forward to today, 2025, and we have a barrage of superhero movies with billion-dollar budgets and CGI, everything. I don't know, where's the soul? Where's the sweat? Where's a scene where a stuntman actually gets hit and keeps on going because the take just looked too good to cut? That's what Kung Fu still brings today. It's real movement, it's real impact, and it's real artistry. When I watch Wheels on Meals or Yes, Madam, I'm not watching just the fight. I'm watching a dance with consequences. I'm watching precision, timing, and actors who train their bodies like actual weapons. That kind of cinema, it's timeless. And you feel every hit. You feel every fall. You feel every guy being kicked, punched, right through that plate glass window. Every ounce of pride behind that last punch decides the fate of the village or the temple or a bad guy with no eyebrows and a snake cane. Kung Fu isn't just a genre, it's a resistant to the overly polished. It's a middle finger to your everyday algorithms. It's blood, bruises, and beauty all rolled into one grainy frame. Now, if you don't believe me, go put on Ricky O and try not to flinch when someone punches through another man's entire torso or knocks their jaw off or crushes their head with just their bare hands. It's like, punching through wet cardboard. Go watch that and then tell me that Kung Fu has no place in 2025. So, yeah, Kung Fu still belongs. Maybe now more than ever. Kung Fu movies, martial art movies, they teach us to get back up, to fight smarter, and never underestimate someone just because they're quiet and barefoot and emotional trauma. The static might flicker, but the signal is still strong, still swift, and still badass. And, you know, that's just how Kung Fu reacts to me, and I hope it still reacts to you still to this day. So, thanks for listening to the Static Zone, and we will be right back. So we're gonna close up shop and bring out the Dropbox. But if you got your own wrong rental story, your movie that your dad brought home and scarred you to half to death, send it in. You can comment, you can email, you can call the BAMF answering machine and leave the confession. And don't forget, over on TikTok, we are still doing VHS, the video hits of the summer, the movies that we rented 20, 40, 60 times over the summer. Brought them over to sleepovers, watched them, loved them, rented them again. So we're doing that over there. And whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, taped over Power Rangers episode, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, and share. And, tell the world you believe in video store justice. This is Sideburnzombie, returning the tape to the shelf, putting that Dropbox out, locking the door, turning off the lights. And I'll see you next time. Until then, let's stay weird, stay badass, and above all, rewind and be kind.